Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much indeed for coming, and welcome to the Cleardocs Breakfast Seminar on SMSF Borrowing through Instalment Warrants. My name's Christopher Barnford. I'm the founder and the Managing Director of Cleardocs, and my simple task today is to welcome you and thank you for coming, and also to introduce our two speakers. There's one other thing I need to say, and that is that today we're filming today's presentation, both our speakers and the overheads and all that sort of thing, because Cleardocs has customers all over the country, and we put on a seminar in Melbourne and we put on a seminar in Sydney. That's not much good to a lot of other people. So we care about our customers out there. We film this thing, we put it up on a website so that they can see it. So when we do questions today, we'll be asking you to use a microphone so that we can record your questions. I've said the welcome and thank you. I've explained the film bit. The only other thing I need to do is introduce our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker is Julian Smith. He's a partner from Maddocks. In fact, he was just made a partner in July a few weeks ago, and that was an exciting day for Cleardocs when Julian was made a partner. Julian's been looking after the Cleardocs self-managed superannuation funds and various other document packages for us for quite some time, and he's been doing the helpline, speaking to our customers, so I expect some of you have dealt with him over the years. Anyway, we were very excited, Julian, when you were made a partner. Our second speaker is Fiona Da Silva. She's a senior manager in the industry segments from St George Bank. She's responsible for implementing St George's SMSF borrowing stuff across the business. She's been doing that now since it began and has had lots of experience at helping people within the bank help the bank's customers. Ladies and gentlemen, apart from a little bit of a wrap from me at the end, that's it from me, and Julian will speak now. Thank you, Julian.
Firstly, we're going to look at defining instalment warrants and how SMSF borrowing works, the structures of it as dictated by the legislation. We'll have a look at some diagrams to see how bank lending and related party lending works when lending to SMSFs, and looking at some of the key documentary requirements. I'll then hand over to Fiona for the bank's perspective and some observations of St George as to how they've seen this progressing over the last 12 months. Fiona will hand back to me for a look at some of the compliance imperatives and some of the risks associated with borrowing in SMSFs, particularly given the regulatory overlay of superannuation. Summary and tips at the end. Please feel free to ask questions throughout. Perhaps if you could just put up your hand for Kim's benefit so she can give you the microphone. Very brief background. The legislation was introduced in September 2007 by the Howard government. Industry had asked for some clarity from Treasury about instalment receipts, the classic arrangement being T1, the Telstra share issue. Industry wanted some guidance on whether that was permitted given the restrictions or the prohibition on superannuation funds generally from borrowing. What they got was unexpected in that they got a wholesale exception to that prohibition, which was this instalment warrant exception. So that was a great surprise to everybody. It survived a change of government and it's bedding down now, and the ATO seems to be getting a little bit more comfortable or resigned, depending on your point of view, to the fact that they're here to stay, at least for now. So I've given you obviously a copy of the overheads, also some extracts which are sections of the legislation, some ATO material, and we'll go through an example at the end to highlight the compliance imperatives. On the first page of those extracts is some material from the ATO's website, where it's an introduction to borrowing in superannuation. They describe what an instalment warrant is. So that's the very first extract. An instalment warrant is an agreement that enables you to purchase an asset over time. It refers to making a part payment and then pay the remaining instalments and the cost of setting up the loan. If you default, you forfeit the asset and the payments you've made. When you've paid all of the instalments, you take title to the asset. Now, that's a generally accepted definition of an instalment warrant and how it works, and what we're going to do shortly is just contrast that to exactly what has been introduced into the legislation. So, what are they really? And you hear people talking generally about SMSF borrowing or instalment warrant arrangements. What they are really is a form of limited recourse lending. So you have a regular loan agreement, a regular loan arrangement. It's supported by a regular security. For the most part, to date, the borrowing has been against property, so the security is a form of mortgage. And the key difference is recourse in the event of default is limited to the asset that's been purchased with the borrowed monies. What are the complicating factors? Well, firstly, the regulatory overlay of superannuation. As we all know, that's a relatively complex area. And the requirement for the asset to be held by a custodian while there are repayments being made under the loan agreement. So the basic structure by reference to the relevant section, which is 67 4A, and that's on page 3 of your materials. And I'll just go through that section very briefly to highlight the main areas. Subsection A says the money is or has been applied for the acquisition of an asset, and that's an important point. You can't use these borrowing arrangements to leverage off assets already in the super fund. When you borrow the money from the bank or the related party lender, the money has to be applied towards the acquisition of a new asset. Also in subsection A, the asset has to be one other than one the trustee is prohibited by the Act from acquiring. That means it's not an investment free-for-all. The same rules that limit the types of investments that self-managed funds can invest in still apply. Some people thought that placing it outside super in the hands of a custodian means that the superannuation investment rules don't apply, and that's not the case. Subsection C says that the trustee has the right to acquire legal ownership of the asset after making one or more payments. So the point there is at the end of the loan agreement, when you've fully repaid the loan, you can take the asset back from the custodian and you remove that requirement for the asset to be held under a custody arrangement. And subparagraphs D and E refer to this limited recourse arrangement. So the rights of the lender against the trustee for default are limited to rights relating to the original asset or the replacement.